Alright, I am back with another video, and today we're doing something, at least to me, is very interesting. There was a comment a little while ago that kind of asked, like, would it be possible to do a build themed around time? And that got me thinking, well, in regular D&D, there are two sort of time-based subclasses, at least that I'm aware of. Basically, one being the Chronergy Wizard, and the other being the Clockwork Soul Sorcerer, a personal favourite of mine. And I thought, and I had seen a long time ago a Dungeon Dudes video where they kind of made a Clockwork Soul Sorcerer and kind of used certain spells and kind of re-flavoured them into being time-themed. Now, that was a very long time ago, but I thought, maybe I could do something similar here. Find a class and kind of find a way to use spells in a way that kind of has a theme with time control, or manipulation of time, or just, you know, changing fate, or things like that. General stuff like that. Seeing the future. There's tons of stuff in the game that can do this, but there was a problem. There would be so many things I'd want to do at once that I would not be able to do. A lot of the spells I would want to use would be concentration based. I mean, the obvious ones would be haste and slow, and I'd love to have both of those up at the same time somehow, but there was no real way to do it in a single build, and I wasn't sure exactly what class to use either, because there's benefits to going with either Wizard or Sorcerer, for example. And then I was like, wait, I'm not constricted to do just one character, I can build two. So, this is a duo build today. One is going to use Wizard, and one is going to use Sorcerer. Now, the Sorcerer one is a bit more basic. I've done a lot of Sorcerer builds in the past, and, you know, I will quickly be showing that one at the end, but the idea for the two builds is, like, I'm going to be showing the Wizard build here. I'm going to be giving my reasons for taking the subclasses that I do and, you know, the spells that I do, and all of that sort of thing. And then, but then at the end of the video, I'll quickly showcase the Sorcerer build, which basically does the same thing, takes the same spells. It just has a few different abilities that make it different from this one, but these builds are designed to work together, each concentrating on different spells at the same time. They're both support builds with Blaster Caster synergy, but the way they work, kind of using, I guess, the meta spells of the game, will really bring the team together. Yes, you're dedicating 2 out of 4 slots to this strategy, but as long as you have some good DPS, maybe martial characters like a fighter and a paladin perhaps, you will be able to support them really well with this build, and you will see how powerful this strategy can be. These two builds on their own are quite strong, but if you put them in a full party with some melee fighters, the results will be catastrophic. It's amazing. So, let's get into the first build, which, as I said, we're going to be a Wizard. Now, you could start this off with a level of Fighter. What that will do is it will give you a Constitution saving throw proficiency, which we would like for this build, and also the ability to use any armor and weapons that you like. So if you wanted to start with that here, that's entirely up to you. Just know that if you do that, you'll kind of be delaying everything else we'll be getting by a level, including your spellcasting, although that won't matter too much since you hit level 2 pretty much right out the gate anyway. So, Fighter, definitely recommend it if you want to take a quick dip of Fighter to start with, and then go into Wizard for the rest of the way after that. But I kind of just wanted to showcase what a full Wizard can do, because I don't do that often enough, and the same with the Sorcerer. The Sorcerer is just a pure Sorcerer as well. And I kind of learned something interesting. I was watching a Pointy Hat video that he brought out the other day, the one about Warlocks, and he talked about how, like, a lot of people don't actually multi-class, and I think that's true of this game as well. So I kind of just want to experiment more with single-class builds and see if I can make those interesting. And while I guess a one-level Dipper Fighter isn't exactly difficult to comprehend, I still just kind of want to see what a pure Wizard can do, and trust me, they can do a lot. So we're going to be building a pure Wizard today, but starting off as a Fighter would not go amiss. We also get 3 cantrips to start, and it's entirely up to you what you want to pick. Friends would be good, but we're going to have a charisma-based caster on the party who could be the party face, so it's not 100% necessary. So I would say you might just want to pick up some utility options. Shocking Grasp would be great for melee range. Ray of Frost would probably be good at for range as well, and it would reduce movement speed by 3 meters, which is kind of in the theme of the build, as you'll see as we get to later, and I think Mage Hand would be a solid option as well. As for our spells, we get to pick 6, and again, if you take that Fighter level, you can put on whatever piece of armor you like, so Mage Armor wouldn't really matter, but there's certain pieces of clothing that I want to use with this build, so I'm picking up Mage Armor now. We're also going to be grabbing Shield, just because it's good, and now we're going to get into the first of my time-themed spells, and it's probably not what you're going to expect. For the record, all of the spells and their justifications for being used as quote-unquote time spells will be in the description below, along with all of the usual stuff. But I'm going to go with Thunderwave. Now, Thunderwave to me is sound, right? And what do we normally associate time with? Clocks. Big clocks with big bells in church towers. And tell me it wouldn't be cool for you to cast a thunder spell like the snap of your fingers, like Thunderwave or even Chromatic Orb with the Thunder variant, which I'll also be taking. And it makes like a big dong of a bell. That would be so sick. So I'm picking up Chromatic Orb and Thunderwave here, and this build is going to kind of be built around doing thunder damage when we're not locking down the battlefield and we just need to do damage from here on forth. So we're going to be taking Chromatic Orb as a ranged spell attack, which is going to make sense later, and Thunderwave to be able to push enemies away from us. And then finally we can just take a couple of utility options. Long Strider is going to very slightly accelerate our movement speed. I guess we could flavour it as we're making time a little bit faster for ourselves, so it fits here. And Featherfall is us slowing down time while we fall, so that we have a softer landing. That's not how it works, but we just need utility spells. The rest of the stuff could work, but honestly, you can take whatever you like here. I just like my utility options. And then finally, the ability scores. Let me just quickly fix these. There we go. I've decided to just go for a pretty even split here. We dump Strength because we don't need it, Dexterity for our Armour class, Constitution and Intelligence at 16 because obviously Intelligence is our main spellcasting modifier, and Constitution is going to help us maintain those concentration checks. And with the equipment and the stuff we can get in this build, maintaining concentration isn't really going to be a problem for us. I've left Wisdom and Charisma at 10, but you can change these around however you like. If you want to maybe put more points into Charisma or more into Wisdom, it's entirely up to you, but I like having fairly rounded stats. As for our proficiencies, I have gone with I believe it is the Sage background, which is immediately going to give us Arcana and History. The lore I've kind of gone for with these characters, as far as like their backgrounds and such is concerned, is these are two drow twins, hence the twins lost in time. And I believe they come from a far-off future in Faerun, where the drow are much more widely accepted, and I guess, unlike society has become a bit more modern, and as such, they're kind of, more people are treated equally, so the races of the Underdark have actually come up to the surface, and are more widely accepted, and are able to move around. Obviously, it's still not an ideal utopia, where everyone's living great, but, you know, these guys are accepted. So I feel like when maybe they accidentally tapped into the powers of Mechanus, which I believe is like a realm of clockwork and time, which is where the Clockwork Sorcerer gets their powers from, they're accidentally flung back in time to the time of Baldur's Gate 3, and then are captured on the Nautiloid. And as such, they have to now deal with the prejudice that existed against their race, possibly hundreds or thousands of years ago. And I think it's an interesting dynamic for these two kind of younger drow who lived in a society that actually, you know, treated them fairly, being flung backwards and having to deal with this. And as a result, obviously, of the time travel, they have also gained time powers. That's kind of the lore here, and I quite like it overall, because I feel like it actually kind of gives a new character context to the kind of racism that the drow that is sent the way of the drow in Baldur's Gate 3. So, you know, I felt it was quite interesting. But I feel like in order to get to this point where they're traveling through time, they probably, one of our little wizard guy here probably was studying time magic in some way, so Arcana and History and the Sage background to gain inspiration from learning new things makes a ton of sense. We're also going to take Investigation and Insight just because those are kind of the best ones, and because we're a drow, we also get Perception for free. Let's keep going. Next up, at Wizard level 2, we get to pick our subclass, and I'm not even going to sugarcoat it, come on, we're going Divination. Now, I actually originally played around with the idea of going for Transmutation, because a lot of the spells like Haste and Slow and all that are Transmutation, but Transmutation doesn't actually give us a buff to Transmutation spells, it's just more about alchemy and the like, so Divination makes a ton of sense. This is going to allow us to gain the ability Portent, allowing us to literally look into the future. Twice per long rest, we're going to get 2 random Portent die, which basically allows us to change an attack roll or saving throw to one of those die, whether it comes from us, an ally, or an enemy. It is such a fun spell, and it fits feature that fits perfectly on theme for us. So yeah, Divination is perfect for what we're trying to do here. It fits perfectly on theme, being able to see the future. And you can flavour this as either you literally see the future immediately, or because these guys are from the future, and maybe this guy does a lot of history research, he might have an idea of how things are going to play out ahead of time. It's entirely up to you how you want to play this. I think I'd lean more into the literally seeing the future thing, but you know, it's Divination, we have to take it. As for our spells, we are going to get a couple more at this level, and I think you're just mainly going to be taking utility options here, like Enhanced Sleep, and if you want a guaranteed ranged attack that's always going to go off, Magic Missile is what you're after. And we can prepare spells at this level. I'll just leave it with what the game has chosen for us. At Wizard level 3, we're going to get access to level 2 spells, and immediately we're going to get 2 that are extremely important. Number 1 being Hold Person, our big first concentration time spell. I justify Hold Person as like being able to locally, like basically make a small localized bubble of time that you control, literally stopping time for a single enemy and holding them in place. And then your enemies attack them over and over and over again, and then when you release that control, all of that damage that they took while time was stopped is dealt at once, and the enemy basically explodes. Kind of like, I guess, Dio from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, if you've ever seen that. But yes, Hold Person absolutely fits perfectly for this build. Again, a localized time stop feels really fun. But another way we can kind of flavour a time spell is with Misty Step. Rather than actually teleporting, you stop time for yourself, move to a location, and then resume time. For us and our enemies, it seems like an instant, but for our characters, they're just basically moving over there before the time stop spell ends. Yes, there's a lot of reflavouring going on here, but that's kinda how we have to do this, especially when we don't have the actual time stop spell in this game, so, you know, working with what I've got here. We'll get to more level 2 spell options as we level up. There's plenty more here to go with. As our drow, we're also going to get things like Fairy Fire and Darkness and Dancing Lights from our racial magic, but they're not necessary to the build, but it's a nice bonus. Now, let's, I'm going to go with these two, I think, yeah. At Wizard level 4, we're going to be able to get our first feat, an extra cantrip, and a couple of extra spells. Your cantrip can be whatever you like. I'm just going to take Firebolt because at the end of the day, we are still spellcasters. We're just focusing on time doesn't mean we're, you know, beholden to it. We don't have to only take spells that are in the theme. We're still spellcasters at the end of the day. Speaking of spells, let's grab a couple more. As an upgrade to kind of our thunder damage options, let's pick up Shatter. Again, a similar justification to Thunder Wave and Chromatic Orb, the big gong of the bell. And this is also going to deal damage more kind of like, this is basically going to deal it in a radius rather than just at a single target or pushing enemies away. So we'll be able to damage multiple creatures at once, and also objects are going to be destroyed as well, so that works out quite nicely. And also, this is going to be a strange pick, but hear me out on this, and again, the dungeon dudes, I'm kind of stealing their creativity here. We can go with Web. Web kind of has a similar function to Hold Person for us, as it means that the enemy cannot move, attacks rolls against the affected entity have advantage, and while its attack rolls have disadvantage. It also has disadvantage on dexterity saves. It's not a full freeze in time like Hold Person, but where a Hold Person and Web have different saving throws, it might be worth it to use one over the other on certain enemies. But if you feel like Web is not really going to work out nicely for you, then there's plenty of other options such as Mirror Image and all that stuff, or Blur would even be on theme, but that's kind of a concentration spell as well, and again, we're already dealing with lots of concentration. So pick and choose your favourites here, but I'm going to go with Web because I think it's a nice alternative to Hold Person if you're dealing with different saving throws. And I think I will pop Shatter on there. We do also get a feat at this level, and I'm not going to really do anything too complicated. We're just going to take an ability score improvement and bump up our intelligence. A lot of our spells here rely on saving throws and spell save DC, so getting up our main spellcasting stat as high as we can, as quickly as possible, makes a lot of sense here. So we're going to be bumping up that intelligence. At Wizard level 5, we're going to be able to grab more spells, including level 3 spells, which is obviously where this build is really going to start taking shape, namely with Haste and Slow. Haste is going to allow us to give ourselves or an ally a massive buff. They become faster, they gain an extra action, and the +2 to their armor class. The way I flavor this is that they literally accelerate time for that person. Basically, the person who is under the effect of this spell is just moving in double time, meaning that they can do things a lot quicker and are harder to hit, basically moving around like a blur. And then Slow is the opposite. It's a localized time bubble that targets up to 6 creatures to slow them down. They are extremely slow, their movement and actions are both affected, their AAC and dexterity saves are reduced by 2, making them easier to hit. It's straight up the opposite of Haste. and the entity cannot take reactions or make more than one attack per turn, and can only either take an action or a bonus action. It is an extreme debuff. My idea is that the Sorcerer version of this build would probably be the one casting haste because they can twin cast it, and then this build would be casting slow. That makes the most sense to me, because obviously we can't twin cast haste with this build, but it's nice to have them on both in case we decide, okay, we want to haste 3 people rather than try and slow maybe a small amount of enemies, maybe you're just up against a solo boss, so you don't really need to slow down a big group. So it's worth taking both anyway. I mean, we're going to be taking as many time-related spells as we can, but yeah, basically speeds up time, slows down time. Very, very fun. We get darkness at this level because we're a drow, and I'm going to immediately grab these 2 spells. Next up, at Wizard level 6, we're going to get our Divination subclass feature, that being Expert Divination. You may gain an additional portent die. When taking a short rest, you receive a prophecy. Complete it to regain a missing portent die. So this basically adds a little side quest to everything that we do. If we complete these little sub-objectives, we can see the future even more, giving us more portent die, meaning that we can basically continue to manipulate time even more. Absolutely love it. It's perfect for this build. Now, again, we get to take some more level 3 spells here, and there is one more that I would consider pretty damn important, and that's Counter Spell. Yes, it's a meta pick, but we can flavour it as we're literally watching a spellcaster cast a spell, and then rewinding time to before that spell was cast, preventing it from being cast, as if it almost never happened. Maybe a bit less... I don't know, I'm trying to think of another JoJo's kind of analogy. Not King Crimson, that's not how that works. Nobody knows how that works. But, you know, you can see what I mean. We're literally rewinding time to before the spell was cast, basically nullifying it. And then for your next spell, you can kind of take whatever you like here, it really doesn't matter. I personally took Mirror Image, but there might be something else here that could be flavoured as a time spell that I'm missing. I wanted to try Blink, because I thought the idea with Blink could be that, like, you basically do a literal time travel forward in time, just reappearing on the next turn and then travelling again, but unfortunately Blink ends concentration, meaning that we can't really use it in tandem with something like Slow, so it didn't feel that great to me. But Mirror Image is going to give us more armor class, which is always welcome. And we'll just make sure that we've picked up Counterspell. Perfect! Next up, at Wizard level 7, we're going to be getting level 4 spells, and there's 2 that I immediately want to grab. Banishment. Now, Banishment, I'm going to reflavor this as you're not actually banishing an opponent to a plane or anything like that, you're flinging them forward in time. Essentially meaning that they are going to come back to the battlefield in a couple of turns because you've sent them forward in time, but you have a bit of a breather in the meantime. Because what Banishment does is it basically means that that they are sent forward in time, they cannot be targeted, they cannot take actions, bonus actions, or reactions. They're basically incapacitated for 2 turns because they're literally not in this timeline for a little while. I really, really like the way this is kind of flavoured, and again, it helps with that battlefield control. And next up is Dimension Door. This is a duo build, so being able to kind of teleport both yourself and the other counterpart here, that being our twin sister, makes a ton of sense. We flavour it the exact same way as we do Misty Step, except now we're bringing another person along for the ride. And I will be taking Banishment as well. Next up at Wizard level 8, we're going to be getting our next feat. And we'll go into this first because you obviously have a couple of options here. If we go with an ability score improvement to bump our intelligence to 20, that would be very, very solid, but there are a few more options you could go for. The obvious one being Warcaster to give us advantage on saving throws to maintain concentration on a spell, but we will actually be able to get this through equipment, so you might not think this is as worth it on this build, when we could actually go for maybe a bump to our constitution, and then get a piece of equipment to achieve this effect instead. But it is there if you feel like you want to go for it. Spell Sniper would also be really good, allowing you to learn an extra cantrip, like for example Eldritch Blast, to be able to just deal a ton of damage and also reduce the number you need to roll critical hits for spells by 1. That's entirely up to you if you want to pick that up. But the biggest thing I think that would be on theme for this build would be Lucky, allowing us to giving us another way to manipulate fate and time and all that sort of thing, by giving us 3 luck points that we can use to gain advantage on attack rolls, ability checks, or saving throws, or to make enemies reroll their attack rolls. It's entirely up to you if you want to go for that kind of thing or not, but I will be just taking an ability score improvement for now to bump up that intelligence, but there are a lot of on-theme feats that you could play around with here. Again, my builds are all meant to be highly customizable, so do this what you will. And we also do get access to more spells at this level, but there's not really a lot of time spells here that I really want to go with. The only other one I could kind of justify would be Otterluk's Resilient Sphere, in which we enclose a target in a sphere of shimmering force, blocking all incoming damage and spell effects. However, it comes with the caveat that the sphere reduces the target's movement speed by half, and also prevents them from casting spells or dealing damage. So this can be used offensively or defensively. You can cast this on an opponent to basically prevent them from being able to do anything and take them out of the battle temporarily, and also slowing them down, so it's kind of like a bubble of slowed time in a way. Or you can cast this on a party member or yourself if they're low on HP to protect them for a little bit until you can get them healed up. Probably not something I would really go for often, but it could definitely be justified for this build. But I think I'd rather just get some blaster caster options, because again, we're a spellcaster. And since we have a theme of thunder, let's bring the lightning with lightning bolts. Again, clocks are electric in modern times. I don't know. Lightning Bolt is just a really solid level 3 spell option for dealing big damage, so I think it's worth taking here. I mean, you can also, I would say Fire Shield could also be a nice spell to grab here, giving you just a little bit of extra defense, giving you resistance to fire or cold damage, and retaliating against melee attacks that come your way. But, I don't know, that's kind of just a non-concentration spell that can give us an extra buff, so it's entirely up to you what you want to take here. Again, perhaps I've missed something that would be on theme. You let me know. At Wizard level 9, we're finally going to get access to level 5 spells, and there's one that I really want to grab, and that is Hold Monster. So now our ability to stop time in a localized space with Hold Person has been upgraded to all creatures. That I think it's all creatures. They might not work on large or huge creatures. Correct me if I'm wrong. Now, this is where the build kind of starts to fall apart a little bit, because we're really running out of on-theme options here, so I'm really just going to be sticking with Blaster Caster stuff. So you can grab, I would say, a Cone of Cold, Fireball. If you wanted to get some summons, like you say you're pulling them out of like a different multiverse where they were here at the same point of time, I don't know, Conjure Elemental and Conjure Minor Elemental could work. Blight could be fun if you wanted to flavour it as like you're aging someone really quickly, but we'll get to that later. There's a ton of different things you could do here, so really play around with it. Telekinesis is always a fun spell, but I think we just want to take another big blaster option, so Fireball just being a generic thing to round it out works, because it's a big fuck-off explosion of fire, so, you know, works out quite nicely. Next up, at Wizard level 10, we're going to be getting our final divination features, and unfortunately they're kind of disappointing. We're going to be getting the ability to gain Dark Vision, which we already have as a drow. If you're playing a human, this still sucks because it's a level 10 feature. But we do also get See Invisibility, which is slightly better, but it's also just a level 2 spell. They really didn't know what to do with some of the higher level features in this game, I've got to admit. But regardless, we're here for other stuff, like another cantrip, which can be whatever you want. Bone Chill. And also we do get to take some more level 5 spells at this point. And I would say, again, this is kind of a pick your favourite situation, grab whatever you want. I'm going to pick up Otterluk's Resilient Sphere, since I kind of made a case for it earlier, but it's still not the greatest option. And I would say Telekinesis, again, it is just a fun spell, but again, Blight or something could also work. Next up at Wizard level 11, we're going to get access to level 6 spells, and there's one that I immediately want to go for, Disintegrate. You age somebody so quick that they go through their whole life, then their death, then their corpse rots and turns to dust, you send them forward millennia. It is an awesome final attack kind of deal that we get for this build that I think is awesome. I think it fits perfectly on theme as just basically saying your existence is over. I think it's brilliant. I love it. In a similar vein, Flesh to Stone would also work, allowing us to restrain a foe, again kind of stopping time, and then accelerating time in a different way as they slowly stay in that frozen state as stone overcomes them. Again, that's a bit more of a stretch than Disintegrate, but it's a similar sort of deal. But of course, there's plenty of other options you could go with. Eye Bite, Create Undead, Chain Lightning, again we're kind of going for lightning spells. Otto's Irresistible Dance if you just want to be funny. Arcane Gates could kind of work like a time and space portal, I guess. It's a bit loose there. Wall of Ice. I don't usually get to kind of play around with different level 6 spells, because often I don't get them because I've multi-classed in some way. So it's entirely up to you what you want to pick up here, but I've made a case for these two, so we'll stick with them. And I will manipulate some stuff. Let's put Disintegrate in there. And then finally, at Wizard level 12, we can grab another feat and a couple more spells. I'm going to pick up Chain Lightning again because we've kind of taken lightning spells already, so we might as well have one. And again, anything you want, it really doesn't matter. I'm going to go with Blur. Maybe you're like creating a temporal distortion around you, which makes you a bit hard to hit. Like you're technically in like 2 places at once or something like that because you're somewhere in between time. I don't know. It's a level 2 spell. Don't hurt me. But yeah, I feel like we've got some pretty solid options here all around. I think we've got a lot of stuff that's generally on theme and is going to feel really fun to play. And again, we do get to take another feat at this level, and again, like I said, Warcaster, Lucky, any of these will work. I'll keep it simple and go for a bump to our Constitution, just so we have that little bit of extra HP, as well as better concentration saves. And because, like I said, we will be able to use equipment to be able to give a better chance to our concentration saving throws. So, let's have a look at it now. And that is the build. Overall, you're going to get a lot out of this build. Tons of battlefield control, big damage. Yes, it's a lot of concentration spells, but that's why we have a second character here. And with our equipment as well, which we'll get to in a little bit, we're going to have a lot to work with. You have a lot of versatility, and you're going to be a fairly essential member of the party. But let's quickly take a look at the second character, our twin sister. Again, I kind of tried to make these guys look similar, but honestly, they're just basically siblings. They're not identical twins, obviously, because they're different, but you know what I mean. The theming is there, okay? Anyways, so the subclass I have gone with for this is Wild Magic. I initially went with Storm because of the theme of, like, thunder and time and all that, but then I thought, actually, if we're going Divination Wizard, Wild Magic kind of mirrors that in a weird way. It's another subclass that allows us to alter fate, allowing us to use things like Bend Luck to alter attack rolls, ability checks, and saving throws by spending our sorcery points. We also get things like Tides of Chaos, which would allow us to gain advantage on similar checks, stuff like that. Now, obviously, this comes with the caveat of Wild Magic Surges, but there's actually quite a few surges that fit with this build. There's one that slows down, you know, whoever it is cast upon. So basically, it could slow down yourself, which, you know, or it could slow down an enemy if you're using the level 11 feature, which I'll get to in a minute. But there's just a ton of things that would work, and I like to think of it as, because these guys don't exactly have masterful control over time magic, I'd like to think that the Wild Magic Surges are temporal distortions, creatures being pulled in from other points in time, time slowing down, time speeding up, you know, various anomalies that should not be possible, things happening over different multiverses and such like that. So I feel like Wild Magic, overall, for the theme, is really cool. And like I say, we also do get a level 11 feature, which is not shown here, but I can just basically tell you because I know what it is. It basically allows you to, whenever someone casts a spell around you, mainly an enemy, you can force a Wild Magic Surge to happen on that character. So you basically get to take a roll of the dice and see if you can get something really negative. In the combat footage, I was actually able to slow down an enemy using this feature, basically using a controlled slow down of time. It was so on theme, I couldn't believe I got so lucky. It was really awesome, and overall I feel like this Wild Magic is the perfect subclass to complement Divination Wizard. And yeah, obviously if you go with a sorcerer, you're going to get Constitution saving throw proficiency, which is great, meaning we're going to have a great time maintaining our concentration. And yeah, overall I think it's going to work out quite nicely. In fact, we can look at the spell book, and you can see here that I've taken mostly the same spells. Unfortunately, Sorcerer obviously gets access to a lot fewer spells, but that's okay since we're kind of limited for things that are on theme anyway. So I went with Thunderwave, Mage Armour, and Shield, Shatter, Misty Step, and Hold Person, Lightning Bolt, Counterspell, Haste, and Slow, Banishment, Hold Monster, and Disintegrate. The meta magic options that I chose were Twin Spell, obviously to Twin Haste, Extended Spell to extend for time of things like Slow, or Haste if we so choose, or even Hold Person, Quicken Spell, so we can cast these things as a bonus action, giving us something to do with that. And finally, Heighten Spell. Again, things like Hold Person has saving throws, so being able to give disadvantage on those saving throws, basically guaranteeing those time stops, is super good. And obviously we have the similar cantrips to what we chose with our Wizard. And yeah, nothing else really to talk about here. We got all of our reactions here from like Ben. Like, here it is, Controlled Chaos. Induce a wild magic surge on a nearby spellcaster. That's what I was talking about. Yeah, overall, I feel like these builds are going to work really, really nicely together. They're both kind of about time, manipulating time, slowing things down, speeding things up, literally aging things into dust, flinging things forward in time, stopping time, and letting the gong ring, or the bell, I guess, with thunder damage. And I think both of these builds work really, really nicely together, like I say. I mean, haste and slow and all those spells are literally meta-defining because they just do so much for battlefield control. And I would actually say having this set up in Honor mode might just work. Again, I can't really speak for how effective any of my builds are in Honor mode, as I test them on Tactician, but I do feel like these builds will be pretty solid for those purposes. I feel like single class builds honestly work better for Honor mode, because you can just kind of build for, you know, ability scores and such to keep your stats up, which means you're less likely to die and just get more spells off more often. I feel like multi-classing, where you can make really overpowered combos specifically for Honor mode, if you're playing without prior knowledge or are just trying to do it without like guides or something, I feel like single class building can really work, but that's a bit of a tangent. Let's get into the equipment. Now, the equipment for this build is going to work slightly differently than I usually would, because there's a ton of possible options, and I'm going to go over the potential utilities of each one. But let's go over this kind of main sort of set of stuff that I've got here, and then we'll get into the other possibilities. All of this stuff here, in fact, any of the equipment that I showcase here can work on both builds, so you just get to pick and choose which characters you want to put stuff on. There are some stuff that's going to work better with a wizard and some stuff that's going to work better with a sorcerer, as I'll get into, but any of the stuff you see in this guy's inventory are going to work for either. Let's get into what I have currently equipped. Let's get the obvious one out of the way, the Markiplier Staff. That's just what it's called now. This is basically the best Act 3 option you can kind of get for a pure spellcaster like what we're going for. It's going to give us a +1 bonus to spell save DC and spell attack rolls. It's going to allow us to, once per long rest, cast any spell we like without using a spell slot, and it's also going to grant us Kareska's Favour, allowing us to buff ourselves with a certain element, including Thunder. So we buff ourselves with Thunder, giving us access to extra Thunder spells and the ability to inflict Reverberation on every spell that we cast. So overall, probably the most powerful option, but there are other ones. We'll get into those in a minute. As for our ranged weapons, I've decided to equip dual hand crossbows. Because we're playing as a drow, we get proficiency with rapiers, short swords, and hand crossbows, as well as because we are a wizard and a sorcerer, they both get the same proficiencies, we get access to quarterstaffs and daggers. So we have quite a few things to choose from. Again, if you took that level of fighter, you'd get all of them, but we're not exactly limited for options. And since we have hand crossbow proficiency, I've stuck dual hand crossbows on here, just so you have something to do with your bonus action, because I found a lot of the time, if we're not casting Misty Step, our bonus action as a wizard isn't getting used very often, so we might as well have a chance to do a little bit of extra damage with the Hellfire hand crossbow here, but, you know, it's not necessary, you don't have to pick this up, this was just kind of a bit of a bonus option. Let's get into the actual equipment now. First up, the Hat of Storm Scion's power. When the wearer deals thunder damage, they gain Arcane Acuity. So, as you know, we are dealing thunder damage quite a lot, and Arcane Acuity is going to give us a +1 bonus to spell attack rolls and difficulty class for each remaining turn. Reduce the duration by 2 each time the entity takes damage. Basically, for the cost of casting a thunder spell, our other stuff like hold person and slow and all that is going to have a higher chance to succeed, so it's synergized quite nicely with this build. But there are other headpiece options. The main one I would say that is good for the late game is the Hood of the Weave, giving you a +2 bonus to spell save DCs and spell attack rolls, basically an unconditional version of what the Storm Scion's hat is giving us, so you can pick this up in the late game. The only cloak I would really recommend for this build is the Cloak of the Weave. It gives you absorb elements, which allows you to take half the elemental damage of, basically half the damage of an elemental attack, so something like fire, acid, ice, all that sort of thing, and then deal an additional 1d6 of that element type on your next attack. I don't really care about that. This is just a good cloak for this build because it gives us a +1 to our spell save DC, again, giving us an increased chance to hit those hold persons and slows and such. But this is an Act 3 option, and it's not a necessary thing to grab, but it would definitely give the build a boost. Here we have the Robe of Exquisite Focus. This is just a flat +1 bonus to our spell save DC, which, again, works for this build. But you can upgrade this to the Robe of the Weave later on to give you a +1 bonus to spell save DC and attack rolls, in addition to whenever you succeed a saving throw against a spell, you regain a d6 of hit points and a +2 to your armor class, which would definitely be a overall buff. Or, if you want something a little bit different, you can go for the Drunken Cloth. So as long as you have some alcohol on you, you have advantage on Constitution saving throws, meaning that you have advantage on Concentration saving throws, because those are Constitution. And when you gain and then you also gain temporary hit points equal to your Constitution modifier at the start of your turn. Basically, a weird alternate way to kind of get that advantage that Warcaster would have given us, if you kind of want to play into the idea that maybe this guy is taken to the bottle after being flung back in time or something, I don't know. It could be just a fun character trick that he's a bit of an alcoholic. Maybe he was drinking while messing with time magic and that's how they got into this mess. It's entirely up to you. Play around with it how you like. Next up, because we're dealing with thunder damage, I've gone for the classic Reverberation combo. The Gloves of Belligerent Skies allow us to, whenever we deal thunder damage, in our case, or lightning damage, which we can also do, we inflict 2 turns of Reverberation. And I feel like if you're a returning viewer on this channel, you already know what Reverberation does, but if you're new, I'll go over it. The affected entity has a -1 penalty to Strength, Dex, and Con saves per remaining turn. When the entity has 5 or more turns of Reverberation, they take a d4 of thunder damage and possibly fall prone. The condition is removed afterwards. Basically, if you're able to consistently deal thunder damage and consistently keep Reverberation up, you're going to be knocking your enemy down again and again and again and just getting additional damage. Again, not 100% necessary for the build. You have other options, such as the Braces of Defense for a +2 bonus to your armor class, or the Haldust Gloves to give you a +1 bonus to your spell attack rolls and spell save DC, among other things. But the Gloves of Belligerent Skies will work nicely if you want to go for that reverberation thing, as kind of like the bell has rung and now the sound is kind of reverberating within. It's just an interesting bit of flavour and a nice status effect too. And they pair nicely with the Boots of Stormy Clamour. Whenever we inflict a condition upon a hostile creature, you also inflict 2 turns of reverberation. Reverberation itself is a condition, so combining these two together basically means that whenever we deal thunder damage or lightning damage, we're going to be inflicting 4 turns of reverberation instead of 2. Again, keeping that combo of knocking our enemies prone over and over. This also works with our necklace here, our accessory, the Spine Shudder Amulet, meaning that whenever we deal damage with a ranged spell attack, we inflict 2 turns of reverberation. It's a little bit of overkill, but it can absolutely work to kind of basically continuously cycle in and out with reverberation. And this would allow us to do it on any ranged spell attack, not just thunder. But, of course, we have other options for both boots and amulets. These 2 boots here, being the Evasive Shoes and the Bone Spike Boots, basically just give us a +1 bonus to our armor class, and in this case of the Bone Spike Boots, saving throws as well, as long as we are not wearing armor or holding a shield, which we're not with this build, so it's just a bit of a bump to our armor class if we so desire. Or you can go with the Boots of Speed to allow you to dash as a bonus action, giving you more maneuverability around the battlefield without needing to spend spell slots. And as for our amulets as well, I mean, I've gone with the Spine Shudder Amulet, like I said, but there's a ton you could get throughout the game that would also work. The Necklace of Elemental Augmentation would allow you to deal extra damage equal to your spellcasting modifier with lightning, thunder, acid, cold, or fire cantrips, and since we have Shocking Grasp and Firebolt and Rare Frost, we could just get a little bit more damage out of our cantrips if we don't want to be using spell slots all the time. The other one I've looked at is the Amulet of the Harpers. Now this gives us a usage of shield once per short rest, which is nice, but it also would give us advantage on wisdom saving throw checks. Because here's the thing, right? I've made sure this build has plenty of AC, so that we're able to avoid attacks when possible. I've made sure this build has high enough constitution and ways of keeping our concentration up, but our concentration can also be broken if we fail a saving throw and become charmed or frightened or something like that. At least in some cases. I think it's a little bit funny, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, and since we have a lower bit of wisdom here, being able to gain advantage on those checks is another way to keep up our spells. It's a little bit more niche, but it could still work. We also have the Spellcrux Amulet, which would allow us to, as a bonus action, restore any expended spell slot once per long rest, basically allowing us to have an extra level 6 spell slot is basically what I would use this for. And finally, I get told to use this piece of equipment all the time, but I don't usually like to recommend it because it's pretty endgame, but I'll mention it here because it is so integral to the build. This is the Amulet of Greater Health. This can be obtained right at the start of Act 3 if you know what to do, which I won't say here for spoiler reasons, but you can look into it if you like. It sets the wearer's constitution to a score of 23, which is great. That means that we're going to be very likely to save on our spells, and we can put those points into something else like dexterity or wisdom if we like. And we also gain advantage on constitution saving throw checks, meaning that that is a one-stop shop. We're basically never going to be able to drop concentration once we pick this thing up. I think this is the best amulet to have on this build. You just have to wait till Act 3 to get it, and again, if you don't want to look at spoilers, it's a bit hard to find. So pick this up when you can, as it would definitely make this build better, but it's not essential to have right away, and there's plenty of other options like I've stated. All of these are like Acts 2 and 1, I think. As for rings, there's a couple we can look at here. First up is the Ring of Spiteful Thunder. Whenever we deal thunder damage to a reverberating creature, it becomes dazed unless it succeeds a con save. And dazed basically makes the enemy completely incapacitated. They have disadvantage on wisdom saves, they can't take reactions, and they lose a dexterity bonus from their armor class. They basically just become seriously debuffed. Combine this with like slow or whatever else we're doing to them, and the enemy is basically not going to be able to do anything. So overall, absolutely something we want to pick up if we're definitely sticking with that reverberation idea. I've also thrown on the Ring of Protection just to give us a bonus to our armor class and saving throws. Armor class is great to stop us from being hit, and saving throws is better for keeping up concentration. Definitely a good one to have, but we do have more options here, namely the Ring of Arcane Synergy. As you can see, I do have weapon options here that I'll be going over in a minute, so if you wanted to be able to use those weapons with a bit more oomph, the Ring of Arcane Synergy will allow you to add your spellcasting modifier to the damage of weapon attacks after casting a cantrip. And also the Strange Conduit Ring while concentrating, which we'll be doing all the time. Our weapon attacks deal a little bit of extra psychic damage. I'm not really going to be thinking you're probably not going to want to focus on weapons for the most part. You're mainly just going to be wanting to focus on buffing up your spells and your spell save DC and all that stuff, and your concentration. So I wouldn't recommend these, but if you wanted to do something a bit more gishy, you could. Speaking of, let's get into the alternative weapon options. Say you don't want to use a staff, or you want stuff to use in the meantime until you can get your hands on this one. We can go over some options. Let's go over these dagger options real quick, because I think they're really interesting. First up is the Sorcerer Dagger, which will just allow you to silence targets on hit. Throw that on in the main hand, and you have a little bit of melee damage if it's absolutely necessary. But what you can do is you can combine this with either the Cold Snap or the Gleam Dance Dagger. The Cold Snap will allow you to gain a +1 to your armor class while this is in the offhand, and, in addition, whenever a creature misses you with an attack, it must succeed a DC 13 con save, or be chilled. And basically what chilled would do is they become vulnerable to cold damage, which means we can just kind of hit them with Ray of Frost and do a bit more damage. It's mainly for the extra armor class. And we actually haven't even got Mage Armor up right now, and our armor class is already 16, so that's pretty good. But you could also use the Gleam Dance Dagger, which does the same thing. You gain a +1 bonus to your armor class while this is in the offhand, and it also glows with a bright light and is a +2 dagger, so, you know, basically just extra armor class in a different way. So you could use either or. So, we also have some other options here, like for example we can use Short Sword, so the Knife of the Undermountain King would work nicely. In fact, it can be paired with these daggers as well, since they're both light weapons. The Knife of the Undermountain King would allow you to reduce the number you need to roll a critical hit while attacking by 1. This effect can stack, and when you roll a 2 on damage die or less, you can re-roll that die, taking the highest result, basically getting advantage on damage die. This will work with our spells, not just our melee attacks. Everything you see in the first kind of paragraph of this weapon works with our spells too, which is great, which means more damage when we decide to go on the offensive. You also have advantage on attack rolls against lightly or heavily obscured targets, but that doesn't really matter. The fact that this is an Act 1 weapon makes this an extremely good pickup and could work really nicely for this build. As an Act 2 weapon, we also have the Infernal Rapier. Basically, this is a really cool little weapon we can get kind of towards the end of Act 2. It would give us a +1 bonus to our spell save DC, which would land really nicely with this build, and it also would use our intelligence instead of our dexterity for attacks, so we could actually use this offensively pretty effectively. In addition to, we get the ability to summon a Cambion as well once per long rest. It's a level 6 conjuration spell, which is really nice. We get to pull a Cambion out of some point in time, I guess, I don't know, but it works out quite nicely. This will basically just be a decent little buff to our overall kit. Again, this is obtained in Act 2, so you can do this before you get the staff. But then finally, as another Act 3 option, we have the Duelist's Prerogative. Basically, this has a similar ability to the Knife of the Undermountain King, where as long as we don't have anything in our offhand, we score a critical 19. We restore what am I talking about? Think, focus. We score a critical hit when rolling a 19 or higher, which is great. Moreover, we gain an additional reaction. That could be 2 counterspells per turn, meaning we really are controlling the battlefield when it comes to spellcasters. And also, this comes with a free bonus action attack we can use once per turn, again, giving us something to do with our bonus action, and we can even spend one of our 2 reactions to do additional necrotic damage as well. We can also force an enemy to attack us too, but that might not be something we want to do when we're a wizard. But overall, this weapon would have a unique synergy too, and I quite like how it looks a little bit mechanical, so I feel like it kind of fits with the build thematically anyway. This would probably be what I would personally choose if I didn't just want to go the obvious route. I quite like this one, but it's entirely up to you. Let's get on to the equipment for the Sorcerer. Again, most of the things I've got here could also work on the Wizard, but there is some stuff that I think would work better on the Sorcerer here. Mainly the Charisma boosting gear. So let's get into that now. As for our staff, we have the Staff of Spell Power. Basically, this is the same as the Markiplier's staff, with the thing that it's instead a plus... Actually, no, they are both +2 weapons, but this is basically the exact same as the Markiplier staff. It's going to give you a buff to your spell save DC and attack rolls. It allows you to use any spell without expending a spell slot once per long rest. The only thing it doesn't come with is Kareska's Favour, but again, since we have 2 builds, getting 2 staffs that have the main thing we want, and that is that spell save DC buff and the Arcane Battery feature, it's great to pick up both in a single playthrough. But of course, we have some other options here. Now, Drow do not get longsword proficiency, but if you wanted to play as an elf or a Githyanki, you could get it that way. But for what I'm using these 2 weapons for here, we don't actually need proficiency with them. First up is Falar Aluv. We're Drow, so, you know, it makes sense to pick this up, because this is kind of a Drow weapon, especially for good aligned Drow, which we are. It's a +1 weapon that gives us a +1 to performance, and we can get it in Act 1, but it also comes with Falar Aluv Melody, allowing us to buff our allies with a d4 to various throws, or Shriek, allowing us to debuff enemies with a d4 to their mental saving throws, which would help with things like Hold Person and such, but also deal extra thunder damage, which works with our overall theme. So I think this weapon works quite nicely for this build. But then when you get to Act 3, you could pick up Duke Ravengard's Longsword, allowing you to, whenever you kill an enemy, allies within 9 meters gain temporary hit points equal to your Charisma modifier. It's a +1 weapon. It would allow you to use Commander's Strike, allowing you to command an ally to attack using their reaction once per short rest. Basically, another way to kind of support a melee fighter on the field, as well as giving you a +2 to your Charisma, giving you a grand total of 22 overall. I have this build at 20 Charisma just because I pumped all of the points into Charisma as our main spellcasting stat, so you can use either the Birthright Hat to give it a +2, or this weapon to give it a +2, or you could take a 2 points out of this, put them into something else like a feat, and then use both of these together to get to 22 either way. So yeah, technically both are a bit overkill. But like I said, we're using the Birthright Hat for a +2 to Charisma, or you can use the Gibbous of the Worshipful Servant. At the start of combat, you gain momentum equal to your Charisma modifier, basically meaning you get a bit of extra movement speed. It's a different status condition. But you also gain advantage on concentrating saving throws. This can work either for this build or the Wizard build. You can put this on either to gain that advantage on con saves, but I think it's better on this build, since I think you're going to, once you're in Act 3, you're going to want the Amulet of Greater Health for the Wizard build, whereas this one, you can just use this. Like I say, you use this along with Duke Ravengard's Longsword, and you're still getting that 22 Charisma, but now you have advantage on con saves without the need of Warcaster. So, pick and choose. I've also kind of just put the Drakethroat Glaive here, because since we are a sorcerer, we can use Twincast, meaning that if you do have 2 melee fighters in your party, you can cast Draconic Elemental Weapon on both of their weapons. It doesn't require concentration, it will give them a +1 to their attack and damage, and a 1d4 buff of an element of your choice, probably Thunder if we're staying on theme. So I just thought I'd mention this is here, so you can use it as an extra layer of support. We also have, let's get into the main equipment now. Like I said, most of the equipment that I used on the Wizard could also work here, but this is some stuff that might just work a little bit better on the Sorcerer build. We have the Cloak of Protection, just giving us a +1 to our armor class and saving throws. We have the Potent Robe, allowing our cantrips to deal additional damage equal to our Charisma modifier, and at the beginning of our turn, we gain temporary hit points equal to our Charisma modifier, and gaining +1 to our Armour class. This can be obtained pretty much right at the start of Act 2, especially if you're good aligned, and it works out really nicely for this build. Next up, we have the Sword Master gloves. Now, you can use any of the gloves that I showcased again on the previous build. This is just here to say that if you want proficiency with short swords, long swords, and great swords and still want to be a drow, this is a way to get it. You'd also gain a +1 bonus to melee attack rolls, but this is mainly to show that you can get proficiencies with these weapons if you want them, but this is entirely unnecessary. You can choose the Helldust gloves or the bracers, or what have you. Anything you like here, it really doesn't matter. This is just to show that, you know, proficiency can happen. We also have the Disintegrating Nightwalkers, allowing us to not be enwebbed, entangled, ensnared, and we cannot slip on grease or ice, and it gives us an extra usage of Misty Step once per short rest. Again, any of the other boots that I mentioned will work here. Next up, we have the Amulet of the Devout. You gain a +2 bonus to your spell save DC, which is awesome. And the other ability, it's mainly for clerics. You would gain an extra use of Channel Divinity, but obviously we don't care about that here. We just care about that +2 bonus to our spell save DC. Again, any of the other amulets from before will work. Next up is the Ring of Mental Inhibition. Whenever a foe fails a saving throw against one of your spells or actions, they gain Mental Fatigue for 2 turns. So again, with things like Hold Person and Slow where they fail saving throws, this is another added debuff. The affected entity has a -1 penalty to Wisdom, Intelligence, and Charisma saving throws per turn remaining. When it fails a Wisdom, Intelligence, or Charisma saving throw while having 5 or more turns of this condition remaining, the entity takes a 1d4 of psychic damage and is no longer mentally fatigued. It's basically Reverberation, but for mental stuff instead of Reverberation, which is for physical stuff. So it's a nice little bit of yin and yang sort of thing going on between our two builds. And then finally, the Ring of Free Action, allowing you to ignore the effects of difficult terrain, and you cannot be paralyzed or restrained, basically just giving you free movement around the battlefield, which is great for repositioning. One other thing I will quickly state is obviously the looks of these characters are modded. These are both modded clothing taken from NPCs, as well as the hair and face and all that are modded for both of these characters, just in case you were curious. Anyways, I believe that is both of the builds. I don't think I missed anything, and this is already quite long, so the combat footage is going to start playing now. Speaking of, the amount of times I'll get asked, like, oh, what armor is that? Or, like, can you do a showcase for this build? And people just straight up did not watch the video, like, into the later stages where you get all of the equipment and, you know, the combat footage. It happens a lot, so please make sure you just watch the whole video. I probably should have said this at the start, but whatever. Anyways, like I said, the combat footage is playing. You're going to be seeing, again, a ton of battlefield manipulation going on. Haste, slow, banishment, hold person, hold monster, shatter, thunderwave. All of it's going off at once. We're allowing us to basically control the battlefield, basically completely debilitating the boss, preventing him from doing anything. And then once the adds come in later, the extra cambions, they just can't really do much either. Yeah, and then Disintegrate, you know, dealing tons of damage. I mean, it's a level 6 spell, it's freaking better. I mean, you're kind of falling into, and then again with the things like Divination and Bend Luck and the Wild Magic Surges, there's just a ton of extra stuff happening in this combat footage, and you'll see that these builds are super fun to play. They work great with each other, and I think everything stays pretty much within theme. Again, I feel like if we're really trying to make time-themed builds, like especially with the amount of reflavoring we kind of did in this video, this concept would probably be done better as a tabletop thing with actual D&D, so I'm thinking in the near future I actually am going to be doing tabletop D&D content. I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to do it yet. It's definitely going to be build videos, absolutely, similar to what I do here for Baldur's Gate 3. The only issue I have is I have to figure out how to do the visual side of things, because I mean, a lot of people, for example, the Dungeon Dudes or Colby over at D4, they just sit in front of the camera and talk with a bit of text on screen as part of their editing. Obviously, I don't show my face, and I don't really want to do that anytime soon, because, well, I think it would drastically decrease the quality of these videos, so I need to figure out another way of doing things visually. I could still use Baldur's Gate 3 and just have it as a visual thing in the background, putting in subtitles and text on screen like those other creators do, where needed. That's kind of what I'm thinking, but I don't know, I'd like to try and do something different, like kind of maybe just put Baldur's Gate 3 off to the side for a while I'm making those types of videos. But I don't know yet. If you have any ideas, please let me know. But I definitely want to get into tabletop content in the future, as well as potentially creating a space where people in our community who want to play tabletop together actually can. Because obviously the hardest part of making D&D build videos is the barrier to entry, that being able to get a group together at a consistent time, and, you know, actually being able to play together and get along with each other. So I might try and do something like a Discord server soon, where people can get together and play these games and also discuss things and have an easier way of getting in contact with me, for example. But I'm still working out the kinks on that, like how it's going to be moderated and things like that. So we'll see. But that's kind of where my headspace is at as far as that's concerned, because I'd like to try this concept again in tabletop with Chronology and Clockwork Soul. And also just having that extra freedom to do all the reflavoring and such that we like. But yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at the moment, I think. I guess we kind of just transitioned to the channel update stuff with it kind of smoothly. I didn't really think about it as it was happening. But yeah, I definitely think D&D content is coming soon. Like, and probably other tabletop stuff as well. I just have to figure out the finer kinks. And there's always the danger when I'm going into D&D content, because that space has existed a lot longer than the Baldur's Gate 3 one has. And I started making videos when Baldur's Gate was only like a month old, I think. Whereas D&D has been out forever. Most of the things I say have probably been done already in some shape or form, and probably with more optimization. But I kind of just want to, maybe for my D&D videos, just focus more on, like, because what a lot of people do with their build videos for D&D and Baldur's Gate, I'm guilty of this, is they look at the mechanics first, and then build the character around those mechanics second. Or where I actually want to build a character, create a lore for a character, and then seeing how I can twist the mechanics of D&D and the class features and all that to fit that concept. I kind of want to do it the reverse. Character first, then the build, rather than the other way around. And I think that would be enough to kind of hopefully differentiate my content from others. Again, there's probably other people that do this sort of thing and probably do it better and have been doing it for a long time, and I really don't want to step on their toes, but I don't know, I just want to try actual tabletop stuff. And again, once I've done enough of D&D, I might try and branch out into Call of Cthulhu, which is my primary tabletop RPG that I play. Or even other stuff like that, and like kind of just introduce people to new systems and things like that. Anyways, I didn't mean to kind of give like a full channel update at the end here, but that's kind of just where my headspace is at, as far as all this stuff goes. Anyways, I'm going to end this here because I need to get ready for a live stream soon. So, because this is being recorded on Saturday morning, so I'm going to leave it here. Thank you all so much for watching, and if you actually made it to the end of this video, comment Doctor Who with a question mark and like a winky face, because that's like a time thing, like Doctor Who? Like who's that guy? We got time people anyway. I don't know, I'm losing my mind. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all next time. Do 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 do.